Can you do a quick introduction first before you start?
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name is Olivia. I'm the head chair for IMO. I'm a senior at Patrick Henry, and my pronouns are she, her, which I should have put in my name, but now you know. And Shivanshi.
Hi guys, I'm Shivanshi Sharma. I am a staff member in Crisis and I go to Scripps Ranch High School. I'm a sophomore and my pronouns are she, her, which I will also update in my name.
But we're so excited to have you all today. It's kind of a small group, but this meeting will be recorded and it will be available on YouTube for anyone to go back and refer to. I'm Catherine Delgado. I'm one of the Secretary Generals for the JMUN conference. I'm a senior at Mira Mesa High School, and we do have one other member from the Upper Secretariat here today. So Caroline, you can introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Caroline. I am one of the Assistant Secretary Generals for the conference this year. I go to Point Loma High School. I'm a junior there. And my pronouns are she, they, and it's really nice to see all of you. So thanks for coming.
So without further ado, Olivia and Shivanshi, you can take it away.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen really quick. Not with the thing with everybody's names on it, though. And present. Okay. So first of all, I wanted to go over like the rules or like the code of conduct really quick. Like, just remember that these webinars are being recorded. So like, if you have your camera on, like, make sure you know what's around you and don't show anything inappropriate. And we're not going to like require you to turn on cameras, like Catherine said. Like, we prefer you didn't. And then also, please don't say anything like derogatory or inappropriate in the chat. All right. So just moving on to what we're here for. So at the JMUN conference, there's like 2 times when you speak, like either giving speeches or making comments. These are when you're formally speaking. And so when you're making a speech, there's 2 ways. You can either do it during a moderated caucus or on the speakers list. And so it's important to know like what time to give what kind of speeches, but we're not going to go over that right now. So basically what we're going to be doing is going through like the steps of writing a great speech. So the importance of this is to like share your country's position and like agree, like from here you can do a few different things. You can like agree with other countries, propose solutions, and like make different allies or determine who you disagree with. And like some questions that you should like start thinking of are like, what's my country's policy, which you should pretty much already know if you wrote the position paper. What's a purpose, and so like what do you want other people to like take from this? So maybe not just say like, oh, I agree with this person, like get further into it. And like, do I want people to like pass my resolution, become my ally, or like adopt the same solution as me, you know? Basically, we're going to be going over like what the basics are of writing speeches, like what's your, like talking about what your country's, like, we're not going to be talking, sorry. We're going to be talking about like what's important to put in a speech, like what your position is, like why you're giving the speech, what you want people to get out of it. And then do you want other people to pass your resolution, like become your ally, like you want to make sure you know what you want your speech to be achieving. And you definitely want to just like state your country's position, and like you can go on to other things from there. So like there's 2 main times to speak when you're on the speakers list, or sorry, there's 2 main times when you speak. It's when you're giving speeches or making comments on those speeches. That was worse than the first time, sorry. Making comments on speeches. And so when you're making speeches, you can either do that when you're on the speakers list or during moderated caucuses. And so we're not going to be going over those right now, but eventually you'll need to learn about those. And so the main reasons that you'll give a speech are to share your country policy. You're going to agree, disagree, propose solutions, like see who you want your allies to be. And a big thing about agreeing and disagreeing is you got to go more into it, And then you want to figure out, like, from the speech, like, what's your policy? What do you want to do with it? And who are your allies? So you want to get with people who are having the same, like, who have the same policies as you, not just, like, your friends,
Okay, so now let's talk about what makes a good speech. So there's a couple things that you need to include to make your speech good, especially in your opening speech, which you're going to include which is going to be the speech that you give when you sign up to be on the speakers list. And so the first thing that you want to include is a hook, which, if you know from English, is an engaging way to grab your audience's attention. And so first you want to start out by addressing your chair and your delegates. And this can be as simple as saying, "Thank you, honorable chairs and fellow delegates." And then you want to give like an interesting piece of information, like a quote or statistic. And a little later, we're going to be talking about what to include a little more, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so after you have your hook, you want to include your point. And this is going to be your country's policy on the topic of the debate. So in JMUN, our topic is going to be the resolution, most likely. But in moderated caucuses, there's going to be a set topic, and it doesn't necessarily need to be about the resolution at hand. And whatever the topic is, you want your speech to pertain to that. So in this section, you're really going to show that you're well-versed and you know your research. So all that research that you did for your position paper, this is where you want to sprinkle that in. So I would recommend that if you still have that research, that you don't lose it, and you make sure that you maybe organize it so that you can use it during the conference or before the conference when you're writing your speeches. Okay, so then afterwards you want to include a call to action. And so this is going to be perhaps like a possible solution to your topic. You want to end it by outlining some of the ideas for how to combat the issue. And this is really important for a couple reasons. First of all, it's important that you listen to other people's speeches, especially for this part, because you're going to figure out what did they believe, and you're going to kind of deduce, like if you didn't already get it from the rest of their speech, you're going to kind of figure out like what is their policy and does my policy align with that. And it's really important that this part is very effective in your speech, because to somebody listening, they should have like a good picture of what you want to do and what your policy is. And after that, you're going to yield. You can either yield to the chair by saying, "I yield the rest of my time to the chair," or sometimes delegates will pass you a note and say, "Hey, after you're done, can you yield your time to me?" And then they'll take up the rest of your time. If you have no time left or you're over time, you don't need to yield your time. But if you have like maybe 10, 15 seconds left, then you do need to yield your time.
Okay, so now we're going to be going over like a few tips. First of all, go with the flow. Basically, just if you're going to make a speech and you already have one written, but the flow of debate is going in a different direction, you can always like rewrite your speech a little bit and make sure that it fits with how the debate is going. Like, if they've gotten onto something talking about like, I can't think of an example right now, but like they're going in a certain direction, don't try to pull the debate away from that too abruptly. If you need to like improv a little bit, then just do that. It's better to like stick with how everyone else is doing and mess up a little bit than to completely disrupt the flow of debate and sound smart.
Yeah, so you also want to be original though. So this kind of goes to what Olivia was saying, but you kind of have to find a balance. So you don't want your speech to be the same exact speech that every other delegate has done, because that's not going to make you stand out, and it's also just not going to be very productive or very interesting. So if you guys are talking about a specific problem and everybody is talking about one aspect of the problem, if it's your turn to make a speech, maybe you want to shift it. But again, like Olivia said, you don't want to shift it completely. You still want to make sure that it's relevant to what everybody's discussing. And so, for example, if you guys are talking about, in the debate you're talking about solutions, and you realize that nobody's really talking about funding, which is a really important part of solutions because we need to make sure that it's feasible, then maybe when it's your turn to make a speech, you can bring up funding, you can bring up finances and say, I think this solution is ideally great, but looking at it from a practical standpoint, it's not financially feasible.
Yeah. And then moving on to the third tip, be specific. So don't just say like, oh, I agree with this person or I disagree with this person, because that doesn't really say a lot about your policy. A lot of the times that just comes off as your personal opinion. So when you're writing your speech or like coming up with one on the spot, make sure you go into the details of why you agree, why you disagree, and maybe bring some of like something your country has done into it. Say, oh, my country did this to solve this problem and that's why we're doing so good. Or say, oh, my country did this and it didn't work, so clearly this is not the right way to go. So you really want to make sure you're not just like doing surface level things. You want to really go into it and make sure you're sticking on that main point in your speech, and don't try to cover too much in that time, because you usually only have a minute or two to make these speeches. You want to leave room for other people to talk.
Yeah, so like Olivia just said, you don't really have a lot of time, so that you want to be polite, but you don't want to waste your time, because often you're going to find that you're actually going to go over time and you're not going to say everything you wanted to say, and other people are going to do that as well. So in your speech, you do want to be respectful to your chair and say and yield your time to them. And at the beginning, it's really great to say, thank you, honorable chairs and fellow delegates, but do not spend more than 15 seconds of this. And it's really nice to acknowledge like a past speaker, but again, you don't want to spend too much time on this unless it's like a comment and you're supposed to be talking about what they said. So maybe you can just say, like, while South Korea, if I'm South Korea, while South Korea agrees with the speech made by Australia, it also believes that, and then go into your speech. So to summarize, make sure that you are acknowledging the chair and the past speaker, but don't waste too much time on it, because you're not going to have that much time.
And then the last tip is just fake it till you make it, No one's perfect, and so if you get up on there and you have a total brain fart, I can relate. So just make sure you're like remaining confident, and if you have to take a little bit to get to your point, then that's okay. But as long as you're like putting on you don't need to put on a smile, because a lot of times the issues are really bad, but like make sure you're just learning and having a good time.
Yeah. So just to quickly talk about comments. So we've been talking about them often, but comments are basically like a smaller speech. Usually speeches are like maybe 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, but a comment will be about 30 seconds. And unlike a speech, which is going to talk about like a broad, like a broad topic, your comment is going to relate to a speech made about that topic. And so a tip is, if you don't get picked to speak on the speakers list, but you still prepared a speech for that resolution or that topic, you try to adjust your speech and make it a comment so that your preparation doesn't go to waste. But you have to be mindful that, one, your comment doesn't just sound like a really fast speech, and two, you do need to address the speech that was made, or else it's going to seem like a speech. So maybe just take out some key points and try to just highlight those in your comment.
So now we're just going to move on to some tips. Like, they're just some things that you want to carry with you when you get into JMUN.
Sorry, didn't find my unmute button. But so our first tip is you really want to listen to what other people's speeches are. And I know that it can kind of be a little boring sometimes because everybody's going to be talking about pretty much the same thing. And if it's a topic like environmental conservation, or I'll say like wildlife preservation, like a lot of countries are going to have the same topic, so I get that it can be kind of boring, but you still want to listen to what everybody has to say so that you can find people who have a similar policy to you, and that way when you guys get to working together and when you guys get into unmoderated caucuses, then you can ally with them.
All right, and then number 2, communicate. Like, this is pretty straightforward. Like, you want to like send notes and like maybe talk during unmoderated caucuses with people you want to work with. Remember, these are people that have similar policies as you, or and not your friends. Well, it could be your friends, but like, don't choose people specifically because they're your friends. Like, if you're Russia and they're the United States, you usually don't want to ally with them. So
yeah, and our third tip is to make sure that you speak. I mean, you put in a lot of preparation, you put in a lot of work to be at this conference, and any conference really. And so make sure that you're doing your best and you're taking initiative, and when they open the speakers list, make sure that you raise your hand and make sure that you're speaking and sharing your stance, because ultimately it's more fun when everybody is being engaged and everybody wants to participate.
So basically, we're just going to be talking about now like the different speaking opportunities that you're going to have. First is the speakers list, which is the majority of the speeches that you're going to be making at JMUN. So when debating on resolutions, the chair will like create a list of delegates who want to make speeches, and then they're usually like how each country's policy is on that resolution, and like agreeing or disagreeing. And then so they're, like I said earlier, they're usually 1 to 2 minutes long, and like the maximum number depends on the committee. But they're usually going to go with they're usually going to offer the first or last spot on the speakers list to whoever motioned to open the speakers list, and then just pick from placards. Which, if you don't know that, it's just kind of like raising your hand. You have a little placard or like piece of paper with your name on it. You can raise that, and they're going to pick on whoever they see first. And so, again, like, don't hesitate to like raise your placard and be like, I want to make a speech on this, because the speakers list usually fills up pretty fast.
So another time you're going to speak is during the moderated caucus. And while describing it, I feel like a moderated caucus and a speakers list might seem really similar, but when you're actually like in committee, you're going to definitely know they're different, and especially in Model United Nations. And so a moderated caucus is a little different because a speakers list is usually about a resolution, but a moderated caucus is about a specific topic of the resolutions. So you're going to be talking about specific aspects of the agenda topic, and it's a really good opportunity for you to figure out who are your allies, who are people who you share similar policies with. And a moderated caucus doesn't have a speakers list, but you will be raising your hand and waiting for the chair to call on you to speak. And sometimes in moderated caucuses, like at the very beginning, they'll be like, raise your hand, like raise your placard if you wish to speak, and you'll raise your placard. And it's about, they can vary. They can be like it depends on how large the conference is and how large the committee is, but about, I would say 10 minutes, and people get about 30 seconds to a minute to speak, and you want to make sure that you're focusing on the topic of the caucus.
All right, so now we're going to move on to resources. And so this is available to you guys, I'm pretty sure. That's what you just sent, Shivanshi, right? And so this is
Yes.
something that you can use to access all of these resources. And so I'm just going to address the ones at the bottom really quickly. The slideshow is the one we just showed you, and then the YouTube link is just going to be the recording of this. So, the examples. So, like, we're probably just going to go through a few of these. Like, for this one, the topic is outer space. So if you guys want to read that, or I'm going to read it out loud because... So the Kingdom of Thailand supports Resolution 2-5 on the topic of outer space territory by the Kingdom of Belgium. As advancements continue to be made in this territory, questions of ownership and interaction with space exploration are increasingly prominent in the international community. Because space terrorists have valuable resources and unexplored territories, many nations have sought to make gains in this area. Thailand would like to reaffirm the efforts made by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, as well as the foundation created by the Outer Space Treaty as mentioned in 2-5. The Kingdom of Thailand would like to support Belgium's assertion that further legislation should be created on this topic, specifically involving the United States, Russia, and China, the most prominent members of the age of space exploration. Thailand would again like to state that it supports the efforts of Belgium in suggesting that the new international legislation be created to further define territorial claims of nations and create new laws concerning arms and conflict in new territories. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time to the chair. So, an evaluation of this would be, and so it's a clear statement of opinion. They're very upfront about saying like what they need to say, and then it also gives a brief background on space territory, which is really good because there are going to be those people who didn't do research, and it also shows the chairs that you did a lot of research on this and you know what you're talking about. And then it has a clear reference to the resolution, and so they're giving homage to the Kingdom of Belgium and being very clear that they're talking about this resolution. And they have a concluding statement, and they have a yield statement in the end, obviously. And so it does refer to at least one specific part of the resolution, which it says in this area where it says as the foundation created by this mentioned in 2-5. So yeah. And so now we're just going to let's go over this one so we can show you a bad example. Thank you, honorable chairs and fellow delegates. On the topic of outer space territory, the Federal Republic of Germany, also known as the German Federal Republic, highly esteems the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia on their effective and thorough resolution addressing this very important issue. It is critical to find an immediate solution to the problem of outer space territory because it is an international issue that involves many countries. I, the Federal Republic of Germany, believe any resolution to this issue must take into deep consideration the Outer Space Treaty, also known as the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and Other Celestial Bodies of 1967, because it identifies the basic establishing rules of outer space territory. However, the Federal Republic of Germany is nevertheless concerned about the practicality and effectiveness of the resolution because it fails to address the 9th principle of the Outer Space Treaty, as presented by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, which discusses the avoidance of harmful contamination of space. Additionally, as the Republic of France stated earlier in their speech, which my delegation agrees with, the timeline is not detailed enough to prove the resolution's applicability. Therefore, the Federal Republic of Germany cannot support this resolution. Thank you, and I yield the rest of my time to the chairs. So, going into the comments. So they do they do applaud the resolution, but there's a lot of unnecessary details. Like it says there, like it says, the Federal Republic of Germany, also known as the German Federal Republic. You don't need that. You know, you don't. A lot of the time, people don't even say this part; they just say Germany. And so they're very detailed with the specific names. Also, like this part, which I had to breathe in the middle of this name. And so, like, it also states that the issue is important, but it doesn't say why. It's very like surface level, where it says like it must take into deep consideration this, but other than that, doesn't say a lot of substance. And so, as it says here, like the lack of timeline is not good reason to support the resolution. And this is also something that another delegate has already addressed. So it's not really new information. And then using fancy words does not equal good content. Like, you don't need to have all that flowery, like, additionally it's not that bad, actually. But, like, they're using very, like, big words that could be more concise if they used other words that mean the same thing. And so it doesn't really address any of the ideas of the resolution. It kind of just says a lot of nothing. So I think that's all the ones we're going to go over. I would definitely recommend that you go over the next 3 because it's good to see these examples.
Okay, so there are a lot of buzzwords, and on the document, there's a lot more that's on the side, so yeah, Olivia pulled it up, but I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do think that, maybe you should just skim them, just check, if just, to check if you know all of them, because you're not only going to see these in speeches, you're also going to see these in like resolutions as well. So I just want to go through a couple of them. One of them I want to go over condemn and commend. When you condemn something, that means you disapprove of it and you disagree with it. So we talked about this a little before, but when you give a speech, you want to make a little bit of a reference to the previous speech. And so you can, one of the ways you can do that is you can say, I would like to commend Australia for their well thought out speech. And based on that sentence, you could probably deduce that commend means when you praise or approve something. And so you can use both these words to address a speech. I would kind of stay away from saying I condemn the speech because that's a little harsh and not super diplomatic. I would stay away from that. But if you want to say you don't support a resolution, you can say I condemn the resolution in your speech. Okay, and so the next word I want to talk about is multi-pronged or multifaceted. And that means having many different and distinct elements that make up a whole. In your resolutions, you obviously have a really big agenda topic and you're going to be focusing on just one part of that. But even on that one part of that, you want to make sure that you're considering many different aspects of that. And you kind of have to find a balance. So if something is like too multifaceted and it's considering way too much, then you're not really going to do justice to any of them, but you also want to make sure that it's multifaceted to some degree so that you do consider what are the consequences of our solution. So if you think that a resolution is really only focusing on one thing and doesn't really focus on the funding or the practicality, you can say it's not very multifaceted. And so if you could go all the way to the bottom, Olivia, I want to go over a first world country, second world country, and third world country. I don't know if you guys know what this is yet, but a first world country is like a developed country like the United States or Western Europe. A second world country is a country that was formerly communist or socialist, and now it's not. And so an example would be Russia, which used to be the USSR. And then the third world country is a developing country like some parts of Asia and Africa. And I would say that it's really good to have a basic idea of, well, it's really good to have an idea of which one your country is, because that can really help you figure out what are your country's policies and what are their goals going to be, and what kind of monetary resources can they invest. And it's also good to have an idea of what other countries are, so you can kind of get an idea of what kind of resources can they invest, what kind of priorities do they have. So I'll pass it on to Olivia to explain the third resource.
Great. Sorry, I can't see it when it's up there. We're just going to go on to the organizer. This one, you're going to have to download it, I think, or it might, no. Yeah, so you make a copy. Well, basically, this is going to be used to, like, just basically format the whole thing for you, which is very helpful. And so you put your country here. Like, my country is, I'm just going to do the last country that I had in JMUN, which was Sweden. My topic, sustainable fishing or something like that. That's not a real topic, I'm just making it up. And so it basically just formats the whole thing for you. You can put your country. The Kingdom of Sweden adamantly opposes resolution this because of this. And you don't really need to put 3, you can put 2, you can put 4. So you can put it about funding sources, timeline, practicality. I wouldn't, like we said earlier, I wouldn't focus so much as like a lack of funding sources or a timeline. I would just mostly focus on like, are these reasonable? And then you can basically do this for all of the resolutions in your packet. And so you can also put statistics. Like, I would keep a lot of these just like for you to pull out. Like Jordan believes that it's unreasonable for the United States to put such a limit on immigration because Jordan is able to take in twice the amount of immigrants that the United States does. Something like that, which is a fact, actually.
So as you'll quickly see, there's a bunch of pages and there's a lot of advice here. And I highly recommend that you actually go through these because they are actually super, super helpful, but I'm only going to go through a couple. So on the first page, the question was, what is the purpose of the speech and what can they accomplish? And so I like the point Priya makes about how all of your policy, your ideas, your research are not going to be effective unless they are articulated well. So that's why making a speech and putting so much time and effort into it is really important. And then Zach says what we said a little bit earlier, where you want to add more information and different topics to debate. You also, and like we also said, you want to expand on the topic. You don't want to just keep repeating what everybody else. And again, you want to try, your speech is there to learn about to have other people learn about your policy so that they can, perhaps become your ally. Okay, so on the second page, give me 1 second.
Oh my God, who's that? Olivia?
So, how do you determine what is relevant information to include in a speech? So, as Olivia said, yes, it's really important not to include, well, this is just for writing and for speech making, but you don't need, I think somebody's in the waiting room, I'll just admit that. So in your speech and for writing, you don't need to include language and words that are really hard to understand, because when they are that hard to understand, your point will be lost. And this is what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so Zachary makes a really good point. Olivia, if you could just scroll down a little bit. We keep talking about statistics and how important it is to include statistics, and it is, but you also want to make sure that you're including relevant statistics. So what Zachary says is you don't want to use general facts like there are 24 million Yemenis. Oh, that's okay, Magnolia. You don't want 24 million Yemenis in need of humanitarian assistance. Because that's kind of general, but instead, if you were going to talk about why do they need so much humanitarian assistance, why aren't current projects working, and you could say like 8 organizations working in Yemen only received 24% of the requested 3.4 billion as of August 2020. This is a lot more, it's a lot more effective as a statistic because it's going to be like because most likely you're going to be talking about like, you know, if you are using the statistic, you might be talking about why, how to deal with the crisis in Yemen. And this quote is going to give us sorry, I need to articulate my thoughts. This quote is going to give us something to raise a question on. It's going to kind of dig a little deeper. And so if we can go to the third slide. Okay. So the purpose of this page was how do you approach writing a speech when it is based on a resolution? And I think Priya makes a really good point in this one about the preparation. So Catherine talked about this too, but just to like reiterate, everybody has a different style of preparing their speeches. I would definitely recommend going through all the resolutions before and definitely annotating a couple of them, because then when you're at the conference, even if you weren't able to make a speech on a specific resolution, you don't have to reread the entire resolution. You can just look at the notes you made. And when you annotate, make sure you're looking at it critically from your country's point of view. What is your country's policy? And sometimes sometimes you'll just do annotations. And if you want to make a speech, if you also want to make a speech for every single resolution, that's also really great, and it can be really, really helpful. And then in the fourth question, okay, so I think Valerie and Anis make a good point. So,
Anise.
Oh, Anis. Okay, sorry. So you want to make sure that, first of all, you're sticking to your country's policy, because it makes it a lot more interesting, to be honest. Like, if everybody is going to be talking, if the topic is like wildlife preservation, and most countries think, we have to save wildlife, we have to preserve it, we have to make a bunch of conservation efforts, but your country actually, its economy is really important. Its economy is really dependent on what the wildlife and hunting wildlife, then most likely you're not going to agree with conserving wildlife, and that's totally fine. It's not really that fine for your country, but that's what you want to represent. You don't want to represent something that you're not. And this is going to be really, really difficult, because it's going to be a lot harder to make allies, but it's going to make the debate and committee a lot more interesting. And, that also brings up what Anis said about if you're agreeing with another delegate, if you're disagreeing with another delegate, make sure that you're diplomatic and you keep it, and you don't get into personal comments and like at the emotional level, because you want to maintain your respect, because ultimately, one, you're not really going to do anything if you're not respectful, and two, you want to keep in mind that this is most likely not that delegate's opinion and position. That's their country's position, so they can't really do anything about that. That's not up for them to decide. Okay, and then
can I add something really quick? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I think also she was trying to talk about like third committee this year. They're handling LGBT rights, so they don't want you using like hate speech like negatively towards like any group, and even if it's not specifically towards a delegate, you can't use like words that are negatively associated with, that might not be the right wording to use, but like don't use derogatory words towards people where it may be deemed offensive.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't know about what I didn't know about that agenda topic. Okay, so on the 5th slide, this is just about comments, and I'm gonna kind of skip over this just because we do have like 2 more pages to go through, and I think that they are pretty important. So in question 6, yes, like, so as Zach said, one thing that when you're giving your speech, you don't want to just read off a paper. And so if you have your speech written out in like complete sentences, then you're going to be more likely to kind of read off, and you don't want to do that. So Zach says, he says write in simple sentences. So yeah, you want to write maybe even in bullet points and make it so that it's really simple, so that you elaborate based on your memory, not what's on the paper. And then, as Valerie says, and a lot of other people are saying, make sure that you're confident, because ultimately everybody's probably going to be nervous, and if you make a mistake, other people are not going to know that unless it's like really obvious. And even if it is, that's totally fine, because everybody's going to make mistakes. And then on the final page, any final advice for speeches, I think that Zach makes a really good point. So again, like I said, most of your speeches you might run out of time. But and that's normal. But if you're noticing that you really don't have enough time to say what you want, and everybody's kind of in the same position, then don't be afraid to motion for a longer speaking time, because this is just going to help you, and it's really going to help other delegates, and it might get ruled down, but there's no harm in motioning for it. Again, I would highly recommend going through all the advice they have, because it is really, really helpful. And I would recommend saving the link that I sent in the chat, because you're going to get the slideshow and the YouTube link on there soon. And all these resources are really, really helpful. Right now, you guys don't need to be writing speeches. You should be working on your resolutions. But, one thing that you can do to prepare is make sure that all your research from your position paper is well organized, so that when you do have to formulate your speeches on the conference day or before that when you're preparing, you have that information well organized, so you don't have to worry about it then. But if you don't want to do that, we have a lot of time left.
Yeah, and then just make sure you're staying up to date on any developments with these issues, and then if you find something you're like, whoa, this is such a cool solution, I might want to implement this into my resolution, make sure you're getting that in there. And then we're gonna have another rules of procedure webinar on March 5th. And then thank you. And then we're gonna be taking questions now. So you guys can talk out loud. If you want to ask questions, you can put them in the chat. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, if you don't have a question, that's fine. But if you do, you can privately message us. That's fine. So one person asked me, so are we making multiple speeches for each agenda topic, even if we did not write a resolution on that topic? Okay, so you're going to get the resolution packet, and you can technically write up to 3 resolutions, 1 on each agenda topic, and you don't have to, but it's recommended. And when you get that resolution packet, you don't need to make a speech on every single resolution, and I really don't think you even will, because most likely you're not going to get through all the resolutions on the committee, and if you don't want to prepare a speech for one, that's totally fine as well. But in each agenda topic, there's going to be about 7 resolutions, I want to say. And so you can make a speech for every single one of them, but again, you don't have to. It's all just voluntary, and like it's how much you want to put in that you will get out.
Yeah, adding on to that, like Catherine said earlier, you can either, like, different delegates do different things. You can, like, prepare all of your speeches beforehand and, like, write them out. I did that my first year. It didn't really work out too well for me because I ended up just kind of, like, reading from the paper. And so what I did is I usually just wrote down a couple of notes on each of the resolutions and then just improv'd, basically. And honestly, I feel like that works best for me, but just figuring out what works best for you. Like, if it's your first year, maybe try on half of the resolutions, write it all out. On the other half, just write notes, see what works better for you, because you're going to have a couple more years to perfect this. But yeah.
I think it's also really important to practice and ask those questions. We have office hours open, and our chairs and their staffers are always open to any questions if you want to share the resolutions, get advice, but also just practice speeches with them, run through it. These people are really experienced. They have at least 1 year of JMUN under their belt, so they've been in your situation and they're here to provide as much help as possible, and they're a great resource, so please reach out to them. They open their office hours once every 2 weeks, so they're incredible people, and like we just have 2 of them here giving this webinar to you right now, but we have over 70 people who are always willing to help, so it's incredible.
Yeah, we barely have anybody show up to our office hours. So if you want to stop by, you're going to have, like, I don't know what other committees do, but we usually have, like, at least 3 people in our office hours. So you're going to have 3 experienced high schoolers with giving you attention. You also have 3 experienced high schoolers giving you attention right now. So you can always ask questions right now.
When you offer the office hours, where are they linked usually, or where can we access them?
So I have a link on the website, and I'll send it to you, and it's password protected, so I'll send you the password in the chat, and I won't say it out loud.
Okay, so I got another question. Are there multiple speakers lists for each topic? If you...
No, it's only one speaker's list.
In all? Like the whole committee?
Well, usually the speakers list is just the default for that topic, so you can talk, or like for that resolution, you can just get put on the speakers list to talk about that resolution. And then once you move on to the next resolution, it's going to be, it's not like it's not the same speakers list, but you exhaust the speakers list before you move on to that topic. So, or sorry, that was a big word. So you finish that speakers list before you move on to the next one. So there's never really 2 conflicting speakers lists. It's always going to be 1.
And then, so do you mean there's a different speakers list for each resolution? Because I'm confused if you mean multiple speakers list for each like agenda topic or for each resolution.
So for basically how the committee starts is you'll pick like each agenda you want, or which agenda you want to do first. I'm not going to go too in depth on that because that's going to be rules of procedure. But once you pick the agenda, then you're basically, I think you just go in order of like the resolutions. So like you don't need to order those. You would just start with like, if you chose topic 2 to start with, then you would do 2-1. And so then you would say, oh, does somebody want to open the speakers list? And so the speakers list isn't really like a specific thing. You'd have to like say like, oh, there's 10 speakers on the speakers list and you like 45-second time or something. And so you can put 10 people on the speakers list, and then once you run out, if nobody else wants to speak or like motion to like do anything else, then you would just move on to resolution 2-2, yeah. And so then you would continue adding people onto the speakers list. And so it wouldn't really be a separate list. It's all one list.
And for MUN, like, usually there is really only one speakers list, and people don't even, like, really, we don't really, well, I'm not we, but in MUN, you don't really finish the speakers list. Somebody kind of usually motions for something in the middle of it, and that just continues on. And like if nothing else is going on, then they'll go back to the speakers list. But that's for MUN, not JMUN.
Yeah, they do more moderated caucuses than we do usually. All right, well, thank you guys for coming. I'm glad you got some stuff out of this.
Yeah, thank you for coming. We'll see you
Bye.
next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for subscribing. We haven't even reached 100 yet, so that's just amazing getting another one. But thank you. Have a great day.
Ring that bell.
Bye.
We'll see you at the next one. Bye, everyone.